Still pretty healthy, still growing. The U.S. economy shows surprising new strength in figures out today as consumers come to the rescue. A Hollywood cliffhanger, a possible strike with big consequences for the economy and your TV viewing. The Kerry controversy, fallout from war reports built on body count lies. And the odd couple. Can the U.S. and Russia share a space station without driving each other crazy?
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. New figures out today dispute talk that the U.S. economy is in or near a recession. There are problems, but today's numbers indicate the record 10-year-old economic expansion is continuing. In a surprising report, the government said the economy was growing in the first quarter of this year at an annual rate of 2%. That's twice the rate of the fourth quarter of 2000 and twice what many experts were predicting. 2% is not especially strong growth, but remember, it wasn't long ago that Alan Greenspan was saying he feared the economy had stopped growing altogether. Today's numbers gave Wall Street a boost. The Dow closed up 117 points. The Nasdaq gained 40. Anthony Mason is on the Market Watch.
The economy showed surprising strength in the first quarter, and shoppers opening their wallets was the key reason why.
The most positive thing that's going on is that consumers are still out there buying. I mean, they're buying cars and they're buying homes.
New home sales jumped 4% in March, their best sales month ever.
But the economy continues to send conflicting signals. While the consumer is pumping it up on one side, big business is letting the air out on the other.
Any company that ships knows the Bubble Wrap brand.
This is one of our 24 plants in the United States.
William Hickey runs the company that invented it. But after double-digit growth in each of the past 5 years, sales at the Sealed Air Corporation have stalled.
Business is essentially flat.
As its corporate customers try to cut back wherever they can.
Our customers are being extremely careful and cautious, and actually asking for us for further opportunities to bring their costs down.
About 15 sold.
The GDP surprise helped the stock market rally again today. The Dow is now in positive territory for the year, but economist Mark Zandi says the GDP numbers aren't all good news.
The dark side of this report is that investment by businesses in information technology has collapsed.
That's why tech giants like Cisco, Intel, and Lucent have been cutting tens of thousands of jobs. Those mounting layoffs could undermine the consumer confidence that's keeping the economy afloat.
Which all add up to an economy that is still struggling and barely keeping its head above water.
At Sealed Air, they're ready to ramp up production again when their corporate customers send the signal.
But at this point, we haven't seen that yet.
The economy may have averted a recession, but many businesses are still waiting for a turnaround. Anthony Mason, CBS News, Saddlebrook, New Jersey.
Well, what are you and your neighbors saying about the economy? In a new CBS News poll taken before these latest economic numbers came out, 61% said the economy is in good shape. As for who is responsible for current economic conditions, good and bad, 46% told us President Clinton had a lot to do with it. 18% said President Bush. And where's the economy headed? Nearly half of those polled said they believe it's getting worse. 9% said it's getting better. While the overall economy is still growing, some sectors are not, and they definitely can be said to be in a bear market. Technology and manufacturing, for example. The head of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco says he believes the U.S. economy is in a slowdown, if not a recession, and he says what's ahead will be especially hard on California, home to so many technology companies. It is also, of course, capital of the entertainment industry, which, as Jerry Bowen reports tonight, is now facing the real possibility of a crippling strike.
A gentleman never keeps a lady waiting.
This should be the best of times for writer-producers Hollis Rich and Brenda Lilly.
As if I didn't feel geeky enough already, now I was paired with the ultimate geek.
Their new Fox show, State of Grace, debuts in June, and they already have 13 episodes in the can.
Purchased and shot.
But next week, they and 11,000 other writers may be on strike, and if the 135,000-member Screen Actors Guild follows in midsummer, it will be lights out for the Hollywood Dream Factory.
Today, I call upon producers and writers to work together in a spirit of compromise and save tens of thousands of jobs for Angelenos all over our city.
LA's mayor warns the twin strikes could cost 82,000 additional jobs and $4.5 billion in lost income. It's already dead at Palace Costume and Props. No one's starting new projects.
I think this whole town's going to be very badly affected. I mean, the trickle-down effect is for real.
DVDs will be sold in checkout counters at grocery markets.
What the writers and actors want is a bigger share of revenue for cable, video, DVD, and the internet, and more for reruns, which is what viewers will be seeing a lot of if there's a strike, along with more news and reality shows.
Anybody that buys something knows that you wait to the last moment to put your best offer on the table. And we'll just have to wait to see if that's the way this one comes out.
Even if there is a settlement, Hollywood is still headed for a slowdown. There's likely to be less work than normal because the TV networks and movie studios stockpiled so many shows as a hedge against a strike.
So funny it is.
Meanwhile, the writers of the coming-of-age show State of Grace are worried their young stars could have a growth spurt during a long strike.
We'd like to catch them right at that moment where they are coming of age, not when they've already come of age.
And the deadline is coming fast. Jerry Bowen, CBS News, Hollywood.
There is another fast-approaching deadline tonight. This one involves settling a serious political standoff over a parking space in space. At issue, who gets final say over the new International Space Station? It's a 21st century twist on the tensions of the U.S.-Russia space race. CBS's Bobby Harley reports on the gravity of this dispute.
When the Space Shuttle Endeavour blasted into orbit, no one could have predicted the mission would become so controversial, resulting in a standoff with the Russians reminiscent of the Cold War.
This is basically a measure of who's the most powerful in the world, what countries are friends and what countries are not friends.
The space station and the shuttle have had computer problems, and NASA wants to keep the shuttle in orbit an extra day. And there's the rub. The Russians are scheduled to launch their own rocket to the space station tomorrow. But until the shuttle leaves, parking is tight, prompting NASA to ask the Russians to wait. The Russians are reluctant, but NASA says if the Russians try to dock with the American shuttle still attached to the station, everyone will be at risk.
Safety is our #1 objective. Respect among the partners is part of safety.
But that partnership has become increasingly strained in recent weeks. The most controversial issue, the Russians' plan to send California businessman Dennis Tito to the International Space Station, despite protests from NASA and the station's other partners.
It's really hard for me to understand why. I think this flight will be very good for NASA, and I think the ISS needs the positive publicity.
Ironically, Tito is scheduled on the Russian flight now in question, a mission he paid an estimated $20 million to the Russian space program to take. It's money sorely needed. As the former Soviet Union struggles with its post-communist economy, its space program has fared even worse as it moves from a state-run operation to a commercial enterprise. Logistically, the space station can have 2 spacecraft docked at once, but there's only a 20-foot leeway. That's too close for comfort for NASA when it means docking to something that's moving at a rate of 5 miles a second. Bobby Harley, CBS News at the Kennedy Space Center.
Also at the Kennedy Space Center this evening to give us some added insight is our veteran CBS News space consultant, Bill Harwood. Bill, this tense situation between the U.S. and Russian partners in the space station, any solution in sight?
Well, there may be, Dan. It looks like they're trying to work out an agreement. It may be in the works, but clearly some bad blood has been spilled and the relations have been seriously strained. I think, as we just heard, it really comes back to trust and respect between these two former Cold War rivals. The Russians aren't the space power they used to be. They've lost the Mir space station. They've lost a lot of their autonomy, and I think they deeply resent it when an American agency comes in, tells them when they can launch a rocket and who can ride on it.
Well, Bill, isn't the space station at some risk here, or is it not, because of the computer malfunctions?
Well, it could be. That's the reason NASA wants the extra time to check out these systems and make sure they're healthy before the shuttle departs. They want 2 days to do that, and they believe then it'll be safe to leave. So that's the issue. They're being conservative, and it seems like a reasonable request.
Well, U.S. taxpayers are spending an astronomical amount of money on the space station. Why are the Russians being allowed to sort of have the whip hand?
You know, that's really a good question, Dan. You know, this is one of those programs that was designed from the ground up to be an international project where all of these countries are working together for a common goal. But I think, as this Dennis Tito affair clearly shows, that only goes so far. Unlike the other partners, the Russians, of course, have their own rocket ships, and if you've got the money, if the price is right, they'll launch it, and it looks like NASA is powerless to stop them.
Bill Harwood, thanks. A deadly tragedy today aboard a bus carrying American middle school students to a music competition in Canada. The bus trip from the Boston suburb of Newton suddenly ended in Sussex, New Brunswick in Canada. The bus skidded off a highway exit and flipped several times. 4 children were killed. More than 30 others were injured. The cause of the accident is still under investigation. Given the go-ahead by a federal judge, the U.S. Navy resumed its bombing and shelling exercises on the Puerto Rican island of Vieques today, despite attempts at disruption by sea and land. CBS News national security correspondent David Martin has more about this.
In the pre-dawn hours before the Navy started dropping dummy bombs, protesters cut their way through a fence surrounding the range and were hit by pepper spray. With television lights shining, they weren't trying to sneak in so much as make a statement.
Go home! Throw bombs in your own backyard!
Marines with guard dogs were waiting for them on the other side of the barbed wire.
You come through this fence and my dog will bite you! You come through this fence and you will get bitten!
Some protesters tried to get on the range by boat but were turned back by Coast Guard cutters. A few got close enough to force a brief halt to the training, but the exercise went ahead with aircraft dropping 500-pound cement bombs and warships firing shells without explosives. It's a compromise which satisfies no one. The Navy says unless it can use live ammunition, the training isn't realistic enough. The protesters want the Navy to stop using Vieques for any kind of training. The move to kick the Navy out started 2 years ago when a stray bomb killed a civilian worker on the range. Since then, Puerto Rico has also claimed noise from the training is harmful to the health of the 9,000 people who live on Vieques. Today, an attempt to place a noise monitor, that object which looks like a small airplane, in the exercise area was turned away by the Coast Guard. The only harm visible today was to the fence that separates Navy property from the rest of Vieques. A small number of protesters was arrested, but the Navy will be back tomorrow with aircraft from the carrier Enterprise dropping more dummy bombs. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
In Michigan tonight, a funeral for the missionary and her baby killed when a Peruvian fighter shot down their plane over the Amazon River. Witnesses said today the missionary's Cessna float plane with 2 pontoons was riddled with bullet holes when it was pulled out of the river. The plane, which was mistaken for a drug flight, is to be returned to the missionary group. Coming up next on the Friday CBS Evening News, the Kerry controversy and the deceptions of war. And then later, why age is no barrier for Russia's beer-drinking children. The International Red Cross today is mourning its bloodiest loss in 5 years. 6 workers shot and hacked to death in northeastern Congo. The Swiss nurse, Colombian relief worker, and 4 Congolese were delivering medicine to a clinic. The attackers have not been formally identified. Uganda-backed rebels who control that part of Congo deny responsibility. More fallout from the admission by former U.S. Senator Bob Kerry that civilians were killed during a 1969 Navy SEAL raid he led. A story uncovered by a joint 60 Minutes 2 New York Times Magazine investigation. A local official in Vietnam today claimed the killing of more than 20 villagers was the worst act of brutality of the war in his province. Kerry called this charge, and I quote, absolutely untrue. CBS's Eric Ingberg reports on the difficulty of finding facts, much less the truth, in a war.
In war, it has long been said, truth is the first casualty. Never more so than the war in Vietnam and America's long march through its quagmire. Bob Kerry, perhaps with a political future on the line, appealed for understanding of what it was like to be in hostile territory as support from home died.
The moral sanction that is so necessary to conduct just wars had been removed. Americans no longer supported the sustained, lethal violence needed to win any war.
Support came from another Vietnam vet who ran for president, John McCain. In today's Wall Street Journal, he wrote, "In a good war, mistakes are seldom made. No one lies. Breakdowns in discipline that lead to atrocities never occur. In a bad war, everyone lies. Innocents are slaughtered." If lies were told on Kerry's Bronze Star citation, they were not the first of a war surrounded by deception. The politicians of the era told the public of coming victory, the light at the end of the tunnel. Success was measured by body counts that proved wrong. Near the end, the public was told peace was at hand, when it wasn't. Today at the Vietnam Memorial, where many veterans go in search of the solace Kerry is seeking, there was sympathy.
There was a lot of cover-ups because they wanted everything to look good. Everything looked like roses, and it wasn't roses. It was a war, and it was an ugly war.
The official deception surrounding Kerry's mission that day, say many veterans, was common practice.
Well, yeah, one of the issues of the Vietnam War was the fact that there was a lot of systematic lying and exaggerating, especially on the part of the career military guys.
26 years after the war, the Kerry case shows the bitterness and tragic memories of that war will endure. Eric Engberg, CBS News, Washington.
There will be much more of our combined CBS News, New York Times investigation of Bob Kerry in the Times Sunday magazine and on 60 Minutes 2, Tuesday night at 9, 8 Central Time. Ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, beer, the favorite beverage of a new generation of Russians, pre-teens. A Russian court today sentenced an American Fulbright scholar to 37 months in a labor camp. 24-year-old John Tobin, a graduate of Middlebury College in Vermont, was convicted of possessing and distributing a tiny amount of marijuana. Tobin denied that charge and also an accusation that he was an American spy in training. He's appealing the drug conviction. Harsh drug penalties are the norm in Russia, but even more harmful to the overall public health is rampant alcoholism, from ever popular vodka. And now there's a popular competitor, beer. And for children, it's as easy to obtain as candy. CBS's Elizabeth Palmer reports why.
No matter how fast they turn it out, Russia's breweries can't keep up with demand. Traditionally, Russia's favorite drink was vodka, but now beer sales have exploded. Last year alone, they rose by 20%. And even though it's obviously an alcoholic drink, the Russian government classifies it like soda. That means beer can be sold anywhere, anytime, to anyone. Although some Russian brews pack a wallop of 13% alcohol, even kids can buy it. To prove it, we sent this 11-year-old boy to a local kiosk to buy a few bottles. No problem. On television, glitzy new beer ads specifically target the young. Russia's Surgeon General is on the warpath, trying to ban beer advertising and prevent beer from being sold near schools or to children under 18. Can you imagine, he says, 9 and 10-year-olds drink beer. In Moscow alone, we're treating thousands of underage alcoholics. Russia's passion for beer is relatively new. In Soviet times, it was seen as a low-rent drink, and even then, best as a mixer. But better brewing methods, along with slick ads and packaging, have made it trendy. The trouble is, Russia already had a serious drinking problem before it discovered beer. Now, the average Russian adult drinks 9 gallons of beer every year on top of 6 gallons of vodka. That's a deadly cocktail. Life expectancy for men, largely due to alcoholism, is a meager 57 years. It's estimated that half the men who die are drunk at the time, and orphanages are filled with the abandoned children of alcoholic parents. And there's no sign the situation is going to improve. Under pressure from brewers, Russia's government has refused to restrict the sale of beer, so the beer makers can continue to profit from their boom at the expense of Russia's health. Elizabeth Palmer, CBS News, Moscow.
Researchers report what could be a remarkable advance in gene therapy for hereditary forms of blindness. The technique has been used successfully to restore vision in dogs with one type of genetic blindness. The human form causes near total blindness in infancy. Up to now, it has been untreatable. We end the week with a daring and dangerous mission accomplished. From the frigid South Pole to Chile, on a specially equipped plane, the South Pole Research Station doctor who developed the potentially fatal condition was plucked to civilization and safety from the pitch dark and minus 60-degree temperatures at the remote Antarctic outpost. Now it's on to the U.S. mainland for treatment and a checkup. So what does the doctor plan to do after he gets a clean bill of health? Go back to the South Pole, of course, for another tour of duty. And that's part of our world tonight. Sunday on Face the Nation, Bob Schieffer talks to House Democratic Leader Dick Gephardt and White House Chief of Staff Andy Card. Now, here's the great Mike Wallace.
Not unlike our own Richard Nixon, this president may also have done himself in by saying things on tape he wished he hadn't. 60 Minutes, Sunday.
And we invite you to join us again Monday here for the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting from New York. Good night.
For news 24 hours a day, CBS.com on the internet and on our interactive partner, America Online, at keyword CBS News.
This is CBS.